Cops, what has so far been the creepiest call you've ever had to respond to? And what happened? In 2018, I responded to one of the most haunting calls of my career. The dispatch came through on a cold autumn evening, a report of a hostage situation in a quiet suburban neighborhood. When we arrived, the street was eerily silent except for the flashing lights of police cruisers and emergency vehicles. Neighbors stood clustered on sidewalks, whispering anxiously but keeping their distance from the house where it all had unfolded. Inside that house, tragedy had already struck. The father and mother had been killed by terrorists who had stormed the neighborhood in a shocking act of violence. What made this call especially disturbing wasn't just the violence itself, but the desperate phone calls from their young children. The kids had somehow managed to call emergency services before the full extent of the horror became clear. I remember sitting with one of the officers who had taken the initial calls. The children's voices were trembling, small and scared, pleading for help in between sobs. The youngest was barely old enough to speak clearly, but somehow managed to convey the terror they were experiencing. Those calls went straight to our hearts, made the entire situation even heavier. Once inside the house, the scene was grim. The rooms were scattered with signs of a frantic struggle, overturned furniture, broken glass, and signs of hurried attempts to hide or protect. The father and mother were found in the living room, victims of brutal violence, their lives taken in a senseless attack. It was clear they'd fought hard to protect their family. The children were found in the basement, huddled together, frightened but alive. They had been trying to stay quiet, hoping the attackers wouldn't find them. The relief among the officers was mixed with a deep sadness. The children were safe physically, but emotionally shattered. They didn't understand the full extent of what had happened, but knew their parents were gone. The terrorists had apparently targeted that neighborhood for reasons that never became fully clear to us. The chaos and fear they unleashed stayed with everyone involved long after the scene was cleared. Officers and first responders who worked that night struggled to put the pieces back together in their minds. Throughout the investigation, the children were the focus, not just for their safety but as witnesses to the tragedy. Their stories were patchy, filled with the kind of fear and confusion only kids could experience in such a nightmare. Watching them cope with the loss was heartbreaking. Community support poured in afterward. Neighbors and strangers alike brought meals, clothing, and toys to help the children adjust to life without their parents. The whole town mourned with them, trying to fill the impossible gaps left by the violence. Even years later, whenever I drive past that street, the memory hits hard. The silence that day, the terrified calls from those children, and the family destroyed in a moment of terror. It's a reminder of how fragile life can be. The job often exposes the worst parts of humanity, but this was something different. It wasn't just about crime or law enforcement. It was about innocence lost and lives forever changed in a way no one could forget. That call remains the creepiest, most heartbreaking one I've ever answered. The images, the voices, the sorrow, they're etched into my memory. It's a story I carry with me every day.